Does that work there? You know, it's a hard thing to find 4th of July jokes that are good. It's really something else, okay? So what did the flag say to the other flag? Nothing. It just waved. Anyway, I'd like to share this morning a little something that I thought was so cute when I found it. It was 4th of July weekend, like here, and Miss Pelham, the nursery school teacher, took the opportunity to tell her class a little bit about patriotism. She said, we live in a great country, and one of the things that we should be happy about is that in this country, we are all free. Trevor, who was a little boy in her class, came walking up to her from the back of the class. He stood with his hands on his hips and this look on his face, and he said loudly, I am not free, I'm 4. Those jokes inside there, they're not a part of this service, but, you know, I just wanted to share them with you. You can tell some of them to your friends tomorrow on the 4th of July, or bury them, you know, or burn them, if you like. Tomorrow marks our Independence Day. It is the day in 1776 when our 13 colonies claimed their independence from England and British rule. Relations between the 13 colonies and the mother country had already been deteriorating years before this, in 1763. And by the time they signed the Continental Congress came up with the idea of, we need to be free. And by the time they signed the actual Declaration of Independence, the fighting had been over a year old, the actual physical fighting. At the core of our discontent was the fact that the taxes that we had been made to pay to support Britain were going up without our representation. In some ways, our people in the colonies felt that they were being treated more like servants to Great Britain than people and equal partners in this English monarchy. And we longed for freedom and autonomy, our own country. At the session in the Pennsylvania State House, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia presented a resolution with these words. He said, resolved, these united colonies are, and of right to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the great state of Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. And this got the paperwork rolling. A committee of 5 members, which included John Adams of Massachusetts, Roger Sherman of Connecticut, Benjamin Franklin from Pennsylvania, Robert R. Livingston from New York, and Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, went to work using Lee's resolution to fashion a Declaration of Independence for our 13 colonies. The key phrase in the Declaration of Independence, which most people know, is the idea that we are entitled to life, to liberty, and to the pursuit of happiness in our experience. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of those who are governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So actually, as we celebrate our country's independence, we are invited to think about our own independence. We're invited to examine the state of our own inner union, to explore the colonies of our own thoughts, attitudes and beliefs, and to see if there are indeed situations, challenges, experience that we need to free ourselves from. Can you imagine what the people in the 13 colonies felt on that particular day, July 4th in 1776, when the announcement was made, we are declaring our independence from Great Britain? I imagine that there was some fear along with that, because it was something that was new. It was the future. It was unknown. But they knew in their hearts that this was the right move for them. Sometimes we feel that same way too. We become aware of some things that we need to let go of. We need to be free of. And we hesitate because it's unknown territory for us. The biggest outer experience that I can personally relate to this new sense of freedom was when I retired from Hospira, a company, a pharmaceutical company in McPherson, Kansas, that I'd worked at for 22 years. And in my leadership capacity there, I learned a lot about life, a lot about myself as well. In the dynamics every day with people from different cultures and religions and ideologies, learning how to work with them so that they could work with each other, so that we could together produce something of good. It was exciting, it was frustrating, it was tear-jerking, because in a community like that, as in the world, okay, hurting people often are very hurtful to others. And people tend to bring with them, it's that old proverbial, we've got that sack, and it's got all those feelings in there that are unresolved and the negative things, and we carry that with us. And sometimes we're not aware that we are bringing those things right into the midst of a situation, and that is causing other people problems. I enjoyed my work. It was a kind of ministry, okay, as I work with people. They came to me because we were having problems on the lines. When machines would break down, it meant that there would be overtime required of workers to make up for that, because we were making drugs that the doctors and hospitals needed. And dealing with that, with people who were upset and angry because they had to do the overtime, with people who brought in to that work environment the things that they were dealing with outside of that environment, it was a challenge, okay? And I was called on to be a leader, to be an inspirer, an encourager, and sometimes to be a sit down with me, we need to talk about this person, okay? And all of those things were good. But when I walked out on that particular day, after having done my exit interview with the folks in HR, and I walked out of there, what came to me was that same song that Martin Luther King Jr. used at the end of his I Have a Dream speech. Free at last, thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. Now, you may have experienced that same kind of freedom. Maybe it wasn't in the occasion of your retirement, but in some other thing. Maybe it was when you realized the anger that you were holding on to, you were able to release. Or that person that hurt you so much that you were holding in a state of unforgiveness, and you realized, this is hurting me more than them, and you decided to let it go. Free at last, free at last. There are all kinds of ways that we give up our freedom in life. Sometimes unawares, sometimes knowingly, we hold on to things that we need to let go of. There's a lot that we can learn from a particular donkey. One day, a farmer's donkey fell down into an open well, and the donkey cried piteously for hours as the farmer tried to figure out what he could do to get the donkey out. And he just really couldn't think of any way to get the donkey out of the well. He came to the conclusion that it was probably impossible. Well, he thought the donkey was old, and that well needed to be closed up anyway, so he invited his neighbors, the other farmers nearby, to come, and they all grabbed up shovels and began pouring dirt down into the well. Well, Once the poor donkey realized what was happening, he really cried, okay? And he cried even more horribly. And then, to everyone's amazement, he quieted down. A few shovel loads more, and the farmer decided to take a look down this well to see what was going on. And when he looked, he saw that with each shovel of dirt that went down in the well on the donkey's back, he would shake it off and stamp his hooves. And he realized that the donkey, eventually, as they kept doing this, as they kept doing it, he would shake it off and stomp it down, okay? And each time he would rise up. Eventually, the donkey was able to walk out of that well and trot off, because each time he stamped it down, he raised the level of that which sustained him until he was able to be free. We can learn something from that donkey. You know, stuff happens. Life is going to shovel dirt on us, all kinds of dirt. Stuff will happen. It's part of the experience of being spiritual beings expressing through a human self on this plane of life that is actually a school for soul, which we are. The trick, though, is in balancing things. The trick is learning how we, too, can shake this dirt off, stamp it down, release it, and then walk out on a different level. Each of our troubles can be a stepping stone. We can get out of the deepest wells just by what we choose to do with our thoughts and our attitudes, our words and actions. If we choose to gain freedom by declaring our inner dependence on the presence and power of the Christ, which is God indwelling each of us and expressing personally through each of us, then we can shake off all the dirt and step out and step up. I appreciate what Abraham Lincoln said to an Indiana regiment on March 17th in 1865, and he was talking about the condition of slavery. Well, before I share that, what exactly is slavery? We are enslaved in all kinds of ways. There's, of course, the obvious one, that a person is treated as if they are a possession. They are abused, misused, and their humanity is not recognized. But there are other forms of enslavement, okay? We can be enslaved to fear and lock up our lives, okay? And not be willing to be open to what life has to bring us. We can be, as I mentioned before, we can be enslaved to thoughts and attitudes of unforgiveness, not only toward others, but toward ourselves as well. And sometimes the problem with forgiveness is that we think we have a right to be angry. We were hurt. We have a right to be angry. Anyone would be angry. But we have to ask ourselves, do we want to hold on to that, even if we feel we have a right to be angry? Where is true freedom? It's in letting that go. Abraham Lincoln told these troops, "I have always thought that all men should be free, but if any should be slaves, it should be first those who desire it for themselves, and second, those who desire it for others." He continued, "Whenever I hear anyone arguing for slavery, I feel a strong impulse to see it tried out on them personally." You know, when I was working, I had a wow moment one day. And that wow moment made me aware that it was time for me to let that experience go. I will share that in that last year when I was working at Hospira and I had gone to the night shift, I had a hard time dealing with that time change. And I always thought of myself as a night person, but for some reason I began to experience difficulties coming home in the day and trying to sleep in the day. Okay, and it was a problem for me. I began making mistakes. Okay, I began to feel more stressed than normal with working with the folks up there. And what was actually quite fearful for me was I would find myself driving home. I'd get home, and I'd drive into my garage and put the door down, and then I would wake up. I never remembered turning off the ignition to the car, putting it in park, or anything, or removing the key. I never remembered that. And it frightened me because I thought, this is a big message to me. You know how sometimes we have a feeling, we know that we need to make changes in our lives, and we don't. It's scary to make change, okay? It's scary to leave something that you've been doing for 22 years, okay? Even though there are challenges, there's pain, okay? There's tension. There's also the praise and encouragement and the inspiration, okay? And so sometimes we have to let our donkey fall in the well before we realize there's something we need to do for ourselves in order to experience greater freedom, life, liberty, happiness. The truth is that spirit in us is never in bondage, is always free. But humanly, we can forget that experience of true freedom, freedom from any form of enslavement, comes when we declare our inner dependence by putting the focus of our attention not out there where all the problems are, but on the presence and power of God at work, divine love at work in us, through us, for the highest good of all. A declaration is an act of formally or confidently stating something. It is an assertion, an insistence, or a claim that we make about something that we feel is true for us, true about us. And in Unity, we call these kinds of statements affirmations. The result of my reflection on my situation at work and the experience of sleep deprivation. And actually, I went to the doctor during that time and was told that I had pre-diabetes. And when I went home and you look everything up online, okay, WebMD, everything. So I looked diabetes up and I saw that lack of sleep deprivation is one of the causes of diabetes. It causes your body to be out of sync and to a dysfunction in the way that your body uses sugar, which you need for energy. So all of these things together came into my mind in that wow moment, okay? My donkey had fallen in the well. And the way that I needed to free that donkey was to make a change and decide to do early retirement, to leave that situation. I realized that I could take early retirement and live on my 401k without penalty at the time. Maybe get a part-time job, I thought. Okay, but I looked forward to being able to do my music and photography and whatever else I wanted truly to do. So after giving the company the notice, I walked out and I was free at last. But you know, we are free always in spirit within us. So if we find ourselves in situations that are limiting our inalienable rights for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in our lives, all we need to do is turn to this presence and rely on this inner dependence. It will move us through. We will be guided and directed as to what we need to say, what outer action we may need to do. We need to remember the power of prayer, the power of affirmation, and where our true freedom lies. We may have felt many times in our human experiences that some part of us is crying out, "Give me liberty or give me death." And by death we mean a cessation of the pain that we are going through. The truth is that we are free indeed already. And all we need to do is accept it and move into that experience. This morning, instead of our regular meditation service, I'm going to share with you the affirmative or response reading that's in the program. And what I invite you to do is to take that home with you. Use your cell phone Make a recording of yourself speaking, both the minister's part and the response part. And then you are able to sit back and you can push that and you can listen and hear yourself and experience that process. And after a song from our songstress, I'll lead us in that process. Thank you.